Interpreting is quite a tough task. Difficulties arise in any kind of interpretation, in fast, full of information, highly technical speeches, or in clear and low-paced speech segments. The latter situation deserved special attention from the author. Why does it happen? In order to try to explain and deal with it, it was initially developed an effort model for simultaneous interpretation based on two ideas. 1. Interpretation requires some mental energy, which has a limited source. 2. Interpretation consumes almost the total of such energy, and sometimes more than the amount available. That is when performance deteriorates. It works like a channel utilized for transmitting information. It has a finite transmission capacity, beyond which information begins to be lost. Some mental operations, the non-automatic ones, require attention or processing capacity, a limited resource. When attention or processing capacity is insufficient to meet the demand, performance deteriorates. On the above grounds, it could be built an interpretation model. Simultaneous interpretation could be modeled as consisting of three effort components: a listening and analysis or comprehension component, a speech production component, a short-term memory component. The efforts: listening and analysis of comprehension efforts include all operations having comprehension as final aim, from the analysis of sound waves carrying the speech through identification of words to the final decision about the meaning of the utterance. Interpretation requires at least the recognition of words in the source language speech, and there is a great variance in the way such words are pronounced. Production effort, the interpretation output. In simultaneous, it is the set of operations that extends from the mental representation of the message to the planning of the speech and the performance of such speech plan. Speech production under interpretation conditions is difficult. Interpreters cannot speak their own mind or bypass possible difficulties by rearranging, dropping, or modifying sequences of information. On the other hand, following the structure of the source language, when feasible, may help in some cases. However, it can be risky. Syntactic and grammatical differences may lead the interpreter to get stuck at a certain point of the speech. It can also render the output speech poor. There can also be a risk of interference between the languages in the form of grammatical errors, mispronunciations, and false friends. As a general rule, interpretation must be performed on the basis of the meaning of the source language speech and not on the basis of its words. Memory effort. Short-term memory operations, which last for a few seconds, occur continuously during interpretation. Phonetic segments may have to be added up in memory and analyzed until being finally identified as a word phoneme. It is required, for instance, in inversions when a segment of the speech has to be memorized for later rearrangement. There is a fourth effort, the coordination effort, required to coordinate the previous three. Problems related to processing capacity. At any point of time, 1, 2, or 3 efforts are active simultaneously. Evidence shows that for at least part of the time, interpreters listen and speak continuously, simultaneously. As it was said previously, processing capacity is a finite resource. As regards to simultaneous interpreting, such capacity would correspond to the sum of the capacity available for each of its four components. Total processing requirements should not exceed the total available capacity, or a situation of saturation may arise, for instance, in a fast and dense speech, requiring processing of more information per unit of time. Similarly, the requirement for each component should not exceed its available capacity, or there might be failures in the specific effort. Therefore, processing capacity must be properly managed so that no saturation of a component occurs concurrently with underutilization of others. Effort model for consecutive interpretation. Using the principles above, it was developed a model for consecutive interpretation. This interpretation modality is performed in two phases: listening and note-taking, and speech production. Phase 1 is composed of listening and analysis, note-taking, short-term memory operations, and coordination. Listening and analysis of effort and memory effort are the same as explained in simultaneous interpreting. The only difference is that they are associated with the lapse of time between the time when information is heard and the time it is written down, or the time the interpreter decides not to write it down. Phase 2 is composed of remembering, note reading, and production. Remembering refers to recalling the successive parts of the original speech. Note reading is self-explanatory, and production is the same effort as explained in simultaneous interpreting. In this phase, the interpreter is not under pressure as he was in phase 1, when he was paced by the speaker. Therefore, there would be no need to introduce the coordination effort in this phase. Problems related to processing capacity are analogous to the ones related in the simultaneous interpretation model. Total processing capacity available for the four components of phase 1 would correspond to the sum of the capacity available for each of these components: listening, processing, memory, and coordination. Total processing requirements should not exceed the total available capacity, or a situation of saturation may arise, for instance, in a fast and dense speech requiring processing of more information per unit of time. Similarly, the requirement for each component should not exceed its available capacity, or there might be failures in the specific effort. Conclusions. As far as I could learn, community interpreting is usually performed in consecutive two-way mode. Therefore, the part of the effort model theory that could apply to the community interpreting is the one regarding consecutive interpreting. However, I could not see how community interpreting could be affected by effort overloading as mentioned in the text, since speeches depend on the translator's rendition of questions asked or answers given by the parties involved.